Hello, I would be doing my presentation on Alzheimer's disease. To start off with why we should care because Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of dementia, which affects over 6 million people in the US alone, with tens of millions worldwide. And it leads to progressive memory loss, confusion, and loss of independence. And in my opinion, the biggest factor to why we should care is because there is no cure for Alzheimer's. And as it progressively gets worse, it can cause very major financial strains, as well as emotional and social strains on the individual and the families of the individual. But also understanding how Alzheimer develops is also essential for developing treatments that slow or prevent brain degeneration. And so moving on to the cause of the disease, Alzheimer's is caused by a combination of genetic, environmental, and cellular factors that end up killing and damaging neurons, specifically in the hippocampus and the cerebral cortex, with some main biological causes including abnormal protein buildup in and around neurons, amyloid B plaques, which are clumps of misfolded protein fragments that form between neurons, and tau tangles, which are twisted fibers of tau protein inside neurons. And then there's things like inflammation, oxidative stress, and mitochondrial dysfunction, which accelerate neuronal death, and then reduce neurotransmitter signaling, especially acetylcholine, which is crucial for memory and communication between neurons. And so over time, this all leads to widespread atrophy or shrinkage of the brain, and then the death of neurons and synapses. So as you can see here, this is my drawing of what a normal brain would look like. Obviously, it looks very full. It has all its parts. And then this is what an Alzheimer's brain looks like. It's shrunken down, it's shriveled, and most of the stuff on the inside is starting to almost disappear. And then moving back to the amyloid B plaques that I was talking about, this is what a normal neuron would look like in a normal brain. Obviously, it has its dendrites, has, all the synapses and everything. All of that's normal. And then in an Alzheimer's brain, it's the same thing, but you have these amyloid B plaques, which are blocking it, which makes it hard for them to communicate. And so that's that diagram showing the atrophy and then how what the amyloid B plaques are and where they are located in the neurons. And so how it affects the afflicted is their stages. So in the early stages, it can cause short-term memory loss, confusion, and difficulty learning new information. As it progresses into the middle stages, problems include problems with language, reasoning and recognition of familiar places and people. And then in the late stages, you see severe cognitive decline, loss of basic bodily functions, and total dependence on caregivers. And so how it is prevented or treated, excuse me, there is no way to actually fully prevent Alzheimer's, but there are ways to reduce the risks of it. And this includes just regular exercise, a balanced diet, and then cognitive function, so things like puzzles or social activities, and then also basic things like managing blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, and then avoiding smoking and head trauma. And although, again, there are no full treatments for Alzheimer's, there are treatments that focus on slowing and improving communication between neurons, such as cholinesterase inhibitors, which prevent breakdown of acetylcholine, improving signaling and cognition. Memantine, which blocks excessive glutamate activity that causes neuron overstimulation, and then anti-amyloid B plaque or anti-amyloid antibodies, which help clear amyloid B plaques from the brain. And then there's also like lifestyle and behavioral therapy that you can do, which just helps in maintaining just quality of life. Excuse me. And so diving into more of the mechanistic details of Alzheimer's, starting off with how it replicates. Although Alzheimer's isn't an infectious disease, the cellular damage replicates, which then spreads across the brain through molecular and genetic mechanisms such as DNA damage, where neurons accumulate oxidative damage over time, impairing DNA repair mechanisms. Cell cycle re-entry, where some neurons mistakenly re-enter the cell cycle and attempt DNA replication, but because mature neurons can't divide, it leads to apoptosis or cell death. And then propagation of misfolded proteins, where abnormal amyloid B and tau proteins seed neighboring cells, causing a chain reaction of misfolding and spreading brain tissue. So you can imagine, taking into account this diagram with it, you can imagine some of the proteins, misfolded proteins from here, folding and then branching off and like attaching to other neurons, which then progress and do the same exact thing with the misfolding and stuff. And so, with protein production in the central dogma, abnormal protein synthesis and processing drives all Alzheimer's progression. So the APP gene is expressed normally, but the protein is improperly cut by enzymes, so it leads to amyloid B peptides, and these fragments misfold and stick together to form amyloid plaques, which disrupts neuron membrane signaling. And then inside the neurons, tau proteins can become hyperphosphorylated. So it's a post-translational modification that causes tau to clamp, which leads to neurofibular tangles. So with this one right here, you can see this is a microtubule, and then you can see it starting to disintegrate, and then these are, excuse me, these are the tau proteins that, as it gets hyperphosphorylated, it turns into tangles, and eventually it's all tangled up, and it leads to the disintegration of this microtubule. And so with cell signaling as well, disruptive cell signaling amplifies neuron damage, and some of the pathways include acetylcholine signaling, which declines sharply, impairing memory and learning, glutamate signaling, which becomes overactive, leading to calcium overload and exotoxicity, and then inflammatory signaling, which where microglia becomes chronically activated by plaques and tangles, releasing cytokines and free radicals that cause neuron damage.